Good morning. Very happy that you're all here, whether you're here live in person or whether you're watching us through streaming. Today's an exciting day, and I don't even get the honor of introducing our main speaker today, which is a good problem because we have another special guest who's going to do that for us. I think in the state of Nevada, sometimes it's easy to talk about things that are really hard. We talk a lot about teacher vacancies and how we address that, but we don't do enough to celebrate the fact and the narrative that you're here. All of you here today, whether you're watching or in person, are becoming teachers. You are teachers. You're doing the work. And sometimes in this narrative around teacher shortages and the complexities, we can lose sight of the fact that you're here and we want to celebrate you. So today is as much about us celebrating you as it is an opportunity for you to enrich yourself, to learn, to engage, and to be in community with each other. One of our strongest advocates statewide for all of the NSHE institutions preparing teachers is the Department of Education, and they're led by Superintendent Ebert, and we're lucky enough to have her here today to introduce our main speaker. The Department of Ed has been a great partner as we think NSHE-wide about the different ways that we can engage you, and through their support and interaction, many students in Nevada are getting the supports they need on their journey to becoming a teacher. I've told many of you before, I'm a first-gen student, and my father now is a first-gen student as well, which is a weird irony, right? Because it's usually based on your parents. So when I went to college, my parents hadn't gone, and now as a 67-year-old retiree, he's a first-year freshman here at UNLV. And I think about how hard it is sometimes to navigate the systems of higher ed. And for all of you in this room that are participating in these various alphabet soup of programs, the letters don't matter. What matters is that through partnership with the other NSHE institutions and Department of Ed, we're working really hard to try to reduce the barriers to becoming a teacher, and more importantly, for you to feel sustained in that work and stay. That's really important to us. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Superintendent Ebert to come up.
Thank you. Good morning. I love it. So just a little bit more about myself. I went around the room this morning and was speaking with some of you and your story and your journey and where you're headed. For myself, it actually took me 8 years to get through college. I did not have the support that I needed to be able to get a degree. I had to work full-time. And in fact, when I was doing my student teaching, my car broke down. Yes, thank you. Oh, right. And this is in Fresno, California. My car broke down. Go Bulldogs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to be at Clovis High School at 7 a.m. and then I need to get to the office by 1 p.m. and I don't know what I'm going to do. So I rode my bike. I literally got on my bicycle and rode to school and parked my bike with all the other students. And what did they, Ms., what are you doing? Why are you riding your bike? And I proudly stood there and said, I'm getting ready for a triathlon. I mean, it was just quick in there, but oh my goodness. And so being the state superintendent and having my own life experiences, I know that there are people out there that want to become educators, all of you, but we need different supports. And so when we have the ability at the Department of Education to spend over $9 million in all of these programs to help lift you up, to help lift up the next generation, that was a no-brainer for me because I've had that experience. I know what it is to become an educator and the different pathways that it can happen. So thank all of you for being here. I am proud to be your state superintendent. If you guys have ideas and things that we need to do differently as you move forward with your educational career, please make sure you let us know. I always say God gave us one mouth and two ears. And so listen intently with what is transpiring as we move forward. So with that, I have the honor of introducing, and if you looked before you came on the web to look at the honors and the life experiences, talk about life experiences today, that Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings has lived and continues to lead across our great nation, and not only the nation, but globally. I'm just going to pick out a few, right? Because this is a woman that really doesn't need a lot of introductions at all. So Professor Emeriti and former Kellner Family Distinguished Professor in Urban Education in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. I think another piece that is huge is research, right? It's one thing to have your belly button know, kind of like the experience that I shared with you, my personal experience, but also research. AERA, national organization, higher education. This woman has led it for multiple years in her career, making sure that we have the information that we need to make proper decisions in the classroom. She's helped raise the educator awareness and importance of all of the work, the critical consciousness that we need to have as we move forward as a nation. And what's phenomenal today, I literally just met her physically face to face this morning, not even 20 minutes ago. But she has had a profound impact on my life and my trajectory. Some of you may know I spent time in New York as the Senior Deputy Commissioner for the state of New York, P20 education. The system there is a little different. We have K-12 here. In New York, it's a P20 system. And she helped us, and I hope some of you will pull down this document later on today or in the next couple weeks. But we wrote Sustaining Culturally Responsive Instruction. And that was back in 2018. And Gloria, Professor Ladson Billings, gave us a lot of information, and it wasn't just a tell. It was sitting with our team and having a conversation about where we need to go and did we think about and should you want to add. And so it's through that partnership 5 years ago that she changed my trajectory as well. And so with that, I'd like to welcome you to the stage. Thank you for impacting me, and I know that you'll impact all of our wonderful educators in the room this morning.
That's lovely. I think I have my mic up.
Okay, great.
Well, good morning, Las Vegas. How you doing? Thank you very much, Dr. Varner and Dr. Ebert, for those wonderful words. As you heard, my name is Gloria Ladson Billings. I want to talk to you today about a notion that I've been kind of spinning around in my head and sharing with folks about getting ready for what I call a hard reset. So, Dr. Ebert did a great job of introducing you. I'm gonna have to keep doing this because that's way up there. And indeed, I am Professor Emerita at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. That's just a fancy way of saying I'm retired, y'all. But I'm not any good at it. I am the worst retiree ever because I am the past president of the National Academy of Education, which means I'm still going to meetings and sitting on boards. I am a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. I'm a fellow of the American Educational Research Association. I am a fellow of the British Academy. And I don't even know what that means. I was inducted during COVID, so I couldn't be there. So I just made up in my mind what it means. I decided at the time that it meant that when I showed up in London, I could have tea with the Queen. After all, I'm a fellow of the British Academy. And plus, I knew she had at least 2 empty seats. And then I learned that Andrew probably ain't there neither. So I was like, oh, she can certainly host me. Unfortunately, the Queen passed on, she transitioned, and I'm really not interested in having tea with those other people. So I have to think of something else it means. I'm also a distinguished scholar of race and social justice at the Rutgers Graduate School of Education. But more important than any of those things, I have been a teacher for 54 years. That is indeed the thing I am most proud of. Doesn't matter where it's been, what the age of the students have been, the work is the same, to begin to draw out of people the very best that they have within them. But also, in addition to who I am, it's, I think, important for you to know where I'm from. And so you see 4 pictures there. The top left quadrant is the skyline of the city of Philadelphia. If you remember Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, first line from West Philadelphia, born and raised on the playground is where I spent all of my days chilling every. Okay, you got it, right? I'm from West Philadelphia. Indeed, I'm actually from the same school as that man that hit the other man at the Oscars. So it's sort of embarrassing. I'm like, we don't do that. You know, we Overbrook High School people, we don't do that. But Philadelphia really did shape my vision. If you know anything about U.S. history, you know it was one time the capital of the U.S., that Independence Hall is there, that indeed founding documents were there. But what you may not know is that Philadelphia was the largest settlement of free blacks. And so it became a place that made me ask questions about, you know, who we are and how we got to be a particular way. And it really helped me understand lots of things about the way in which our history has evolved. The picture to the right of there is a picture of the campus of Morgan State University. I am a proud graduate of an HBCU, and you see the statue of Frederick Douglass, who was perhaps one of the most important statesmen the country has ever known. And it's at Morgan where I really grew up. I really became an adult and began to understand the mantle that is placed on the shoulders of those of us who have the privilege of going to college. It's not a normal thing, trust me. While more and more people are attending higher education, so many of our folks don't get that opportunity. So Morgan helped me understand that. The picture in the bottom left is one that we kind of laughingly call the mountain and the fountain. That is on the campus of the University of Washington. Y'all saw the Huskies last night, right? Oh, y'all Duck fans, don't say nothing, right? But on that campus, there is a place in which there is a fountain, and if you look in the horizon of that picture, you can see Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is about 100 miles from that campus, so that gives you a perception of just how huge it is. But we laughingly call it the mountain and the fountain because it's like only 12 days in Seattle you can even see anything, right? Because it's never sunny. So the question each morning is the mountain out today? Because we can't see it. And then the final picture, bottom right-hand corner, is looking west on Palm Drive on the campus of Stanford University. So I went to Morgan State, I went to University of Washington, and I did a PhD at Stanford. So you are looking west onto Palm Drive, and it was there that I understood the true meaning of what privilege is all about and what lots of people don't have access to, being there at Stanford. But now that I've kind of told you who I am, I want to talk about what I'm calling a tale of 4 pandemics. Now, people are going, wait a minute, lady, 4? We done had our hands full with 1. Where are you getting these other 3 from? Well, of course, this is the one you know. The novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19. And it's the one that put us in a situation where we had to close schools, where we had to do a lot of remote activity, whether it is going to school, going to church, meeting with friends. We had to order our groceries. There were all kinds of things that had to happen as a result of it. And it was, quite frankly, we were not prepared for it. But that's not the only pandemic our students are facing. See, they're facing this one too. Now, someone in here is a science teacher and they're going, lady, wait a minute, it's epidemic, but it's not pandemic, because pandemic is all around the world. But can I tell you that when George Floyd was murdered, the calls, the texts, the emails I received were from colleagues in the UK who said, oh, you think that only happens over there with y'all? Can I tell you about the Stephen Lawrence case here? I had colleagues in France who reached out and said, oh, you think this is just something that happens in the US? Can I tell you about what we do to Francophone Africans in this country, and particularly if they are Muslim, that we push them to the fringes of the metro, that most of the police stops that happen in Paris happen against Francophone Africans. It's not just the US. My colleagues in Canada contacted me. Oh, girl, that's not just a US thing. Can I tell you what stuff happens in Canada? Do you know that we just dug up 700 skeletal remains of indigenous children off of a boarding school? Y'all always want to come up here when you don't like your elections, but trust me, don't come up here, we're not better. My colleagues in Australia said, if you understood how we are pushing indigenous people back and forth across this continent, you would not look to us as a model. So yes, it's pandemic. And whether we want to talk about it or not, our kids are living it. The third one is really in very many ways linked to the coronavirus in that the economy was so deeply impacted. So many people did not know if they had jobs. So many people did not know if they were going to be able to keep a roof over their heads. So many people were searching for just food during this pandemic. And then the fourth one is one that I'm here to tell you is not a hoax. The climate is changing, and it is changing rapidly. And it turns out that our young people are more concerned about this than anything. There was a study done of 25,000 young people ages 16 to 25 from the University of Bath. Their number one concern, climate change. And linked to that concern is their fear that the so-called adults in the room aren't going to do a thing about it. So our young people are walking around with these concerns. There may be more. We can talk about the mental health issues that are just flooding the situation. But as much gloom and doom as this sounds like, I actually have a sliver of hope. I have that little silver lining, and I get it from this Indian novelist by the name of Arundhati Roy. She wrote a wonderful essay entitled, "The Pandemic is a Portal." In other words, as bad as it is, it has a place that helps us get to a new place. And let me just share with you a quote from that essay. She says, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks, and dead ideas, our dead rivers, and the smoky skies behind us. Or, that's the operative word, or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. That's the space of hope for me. That yes, we know all of the crazy stuff that has occurred. We know the situation that we have been in, but this pandemic actually offers us an opportunity. We can, I love that metaphor, walk through lightly with little luggage. In other words, we don't have to carry all the stuff we've been carrying into this new world, to be able to fight for a new world, to imagine a new world and be ready to fight for it. So one of the things I like to ask education leaders, and I call you leaders because you are here on a Saturday, okay? People who are not leaders, they picking up their dry cleaning, okay? They getting ready for the game. That's what they doing. So I would say as an education leader, I want you to think about the things that you do not want to do. Often we have a list of what we want to do. But what are some things you don't want to do going into school, this year, which started in September, but again, we're coming to the end of a calendar year. We have a new beginning in January. What don't you want to do? What don't you want to do in terms of instructional practice? In other words, I've been doing this all these years. I'm going to stop doing this, right? I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to just have them read the chapter and answer questions at the end of the book. I'm not going to do that again. Or what don't you want to do in terms of professional development? I'm so tired of going to these professional development, and we sit there and we're not paying attention. We grading papers, we knitting, we finishing the Word or whatever. I want to be able to go to professional development that works for me, for what I need to do. What don't you want to do in terms of classroom management? And I will tell you most of what we do in classroom management don't work because kids are creative and inventive, and every system that we have, they know how to subvert it. I was teaching in California when the so-called assertive discipline was the thing. And you were not supposed to stop your teaching when kids misbehave. You're supposed to put their name on the board. And then if they kept misbehaving, you're supposed to put a check beside it, right? And you keep teaching, and then you put a second check. I was in the school once, this little boy told me, he said, I got 17 checks. I got the most checks of anybody in the class. It was a badge of honor. So maybe in terms of our classroom management, we don't want to do those kinds of things again. And then what don't you want to do in terms of parent and community engagement? We tend to do the same old stuff and get the same old results and then wonder why our parents don't come or why we make no adjustments. We think that everything has to be attuned to the way in which we are organized. So what I want to suggest to you is that we not go back to normal. That's the whole point of the education reset. Now, why would you say that? Why don't I want to go back to normal? That's what everybody kept saying. Oh, I can't wait till we get back to normal. Because I've spent a lot of time in schools. And if we go back to normal, the same kids who were getting suspended and expelled are going to keep getting suspended and expelled. The same kids who never have an opportunity to participate in advanced placement or honors are not going to get an opportunity to participate in advanced placement or honors. The same kids who are over-identified for special education are going to continue to be. So let's not go back to normal. It is, in my mind, time for a hard reset. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, everybody in this room, I'm willing to bet, and I know I'm in Las Vegas, so betting is okay, right? Has one of these things. Even those of you who at one time said, I don't want to get one of them things. I don't want people to be able to find me all the time. We all got them. They are ubiquitous. And because they are machines, they don't always work the way we want them to work. So you know what happens when your phone doesn't work. Well, first thing you do is you turn it off. And they tell you, wait 5 minutes. Those are always the longest 5 minutes in your life. You'd be like, Okay, so you turn it back on. It still doesn't work the way you want it to work. Then you get creative. Oh, let me just pull this SIM card out. Let me see what's going on here. SIM card out, I blow on it, maybe get the little dust off of it, put it back in. Still doesn't work. Then you move to the battery. Oh, maybe something wrong with the battery. I pull the battery out, make sure the contacts are touching. That doesn't work. If you're really creative, you then decide, okay, I'm going to get online and talk to some help group. Can I tell you them help groups don't never be helping? Okay. But, you talk to these people, and they tell you, all they tell you is what you already did. So finally, you decide you have to do the one thing you don't want to do, and that is go back to your cell phone or wireless provider, right? Because you don't want to go there, because when you get there, it's going to be somebody who is all of 17 years old, in a T-shirt who said, "Can I help you?" Right? They're going to do all the things you tried, right? They're going to turn it off for 5 minutes. They're going to pull out the SIM card. They're going to pull out the battery. And then they're going to say something that for people like me is the kiss of death. They're going to say, "You know, I think it's time for a hard reset." Now, why is that the kiss of death for me? Because I don't back my phone up. So you mean all my good food pictures is going away? All them selfies I took with the right angles? Come on now, that's gone? All of that is gone. And what they're going to give you back after that hard reset is a phone that was the way it was when it came from the factory. You get to start all over. So that's the image that I've cultivated around this notion of a hard reset. Let's just get rid of all that other stuff and start again. Now, I wish I could tell you I was smart enough to have thought of this all by myself, but I was a history teacher, and so I always take lessons from history. So, 2 pictures, both post-World War II. Picture on the right is a picture of post-World War II Japan, and having lost World War II, having suffered the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you cannot imagine that they just decided, "Oh, let's just go back to school." They had to rethink what they were going to do and what may have been some errors that they had created or had committed in the education of their citizens, one of which was that they were not extending education opportunities fully to girls. And they said, "We got to do something about that. We got to make sure that our girls are educated." The second thing they did is they looked to the West and realized that the West had done some things developmentally that they hadn't considered. They had elementary schools and secondary schools. They didn't have anything in the middle. And they said, "Wow, they've got this thing in the middle." At the time, it was called a junior high school. Today, we call it a middle school. It's all about 9th grade, right? Because nobody wants the 9th graders. Let's be clear. Nobody wants the 9th graders. Junior high used to be 7th, 8th, and 9th, and the whole time, the principals were saying, "How can we get these 9th graders out of our building? How can we get rid of these people?" So when they switched to middle schools, then what happens is you got the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and now the high schools got the 9th graders, and they're still trying to figure out how to get rid of them. I was at a high school in Indianapolis, and the principal said, "Can I take you to see our freshman center?" I said, "You mean you got a whole building just for 9th graders?" I said, "I know what this is about. Nobody wants them in their building." But here was Japan saying, we've got to pay attention to the development of early adolescence that we hadn't thought about before. They reset. The picture on the left is a picture of Emilio Regia Preschool in Italy. You can't see the whole picture, but there are 2 adults in the picture watching this little boy solve a problem by himself. Emilio Regia Preschool is considered the best preschool in the world. And in fact, at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, we send our preschool candidates to Italy so they can see it. And again, here are the Italians saying, we need to develop young people who can solve problems. They reset their system, not just young people who to absorb information from us, but who think and who make decisions. Now, I want to give you an example of a kind of micro problem that we had here in the U.S. Do you remember Katrina? Everything had to come to a full stop. The unfortunate thing that happened is that education establishment folks, people like you and I, said, we got to get back to normal. Parents and community folks said, did you see what our normal looked like? We had some of the worst schools in the nation. Why would we want to get back to that? And instead of listening to those parents and community members, what happened? Folks who were, quote, entrepreneurial and moving towards privatization slid right in. So now there is no public system in New Orleans. It is a total charter system. That's not what I mean about a reset. but it's an example of a reset gone wrong if we who care deeply about public education don't pay attention. So, you really cannot change practice until you change theory. Because your practice is linked to how you think about the learners, how you think about their parents, their caregivers, their communities, and their cultures. If you think these are people who don't care about education, your practice will reflect that. If you think that these are people who, oh, they intend for their kids to go to college, your practice will reflect that. Your practice is an extension of how you believe people learn. Now, the unfortunate problem in our system is that most of the people who end up as teachers benefited from this system. And so they are replicating the very same things. It looks like I have only 5 minutes left, and I got way more than 5 minutes worth of talk. So I think what I'm going to do is rush through some stuff because we're not going to get there. I want to talk to you about this work that I've called culturally relevant pedagogy, which you may know from this particular iteration of the book. This is the third edition of this book. I call it the book that will never die. Every time I think I'm done with it, then the publisher calls and says, oh no, it's really selling. We just need to update a little thing. You also may know it from the American Educational Research Journal, but let me just quickly run through what it entails. In your mind, you should think of an equilateral triangle, equal sides, equal angles. If you take any piece off, then you no longer have it. Those three pieces include academic achievement or student learning, cultural competence, and socio-political or critical consciousness. Very easy to sell supporting student learning. We bicker and go back and forth over the difference between depth versus breadth. How much do we need to cover? We should be focusing on growth. What do students look like when they come into our classrooms versus what they look like when they leave? And we need to move away from a notion that high failure rate represents rigor. Maybe high failure rate means we're not teaching very well. So the metaphor that we've used for so long was that of a sieve. In other words, we just push all the kids through and only the ones that come out on the bottom are worthy. Let's move to a metaphor of a net. The idea that we want to catch every single youngster. Think about emergency workers. Can you imagine, folks, they hear the alarm bell at the fire station and they say, oh, let's see if we can save some of these people. That's not the mindset. It's let's save everybody. There are some professions in which there should be zero tolerance for failure. We can't keep saying, oh, there's some bad apples out there. There are just some professions that won't tolerate that. I'm going to leave here late this evening. If I get to the gate with Delta Airlines and they tell me, you know, we got some bad apples in our cockpit, I'm becoming the newest resident of Las Vegas. Because I'm not getting on an airplane where there are bad apples possible. The FAA has a zero tolerance for bad apples. I also am crazy enough to believe that we should have no bad apples who are in law enforcement. If you get the opportunity to carry a sidearm, yes, sir. Okay, thank you. If you get the opportunity to carry a sidearm, which means you have the power of life and death right by your side, we can't have any bad apples. And I'm crazy enough to believe that there should be no bad apples in the profession of teaching. Why? Because you too have the power of life and death. You can kill students' spirits, their aspirations, or you can give them life in ways that say to them, oh, I can go on, I can become this, I can do this. So that's what we mean by student learning. In terms of cultural competence, I'm talking about the ability to be firmly grounded in your own culture of origin, but fluent in at least one other culture. So for most black and brown kids, we're talking about so-called mainstream culture as that other culture they need fluency in, but not at the expense of their own language, history, customs. They need both. And trust me, this does not let white students off the hook. They too need to be fluent in at least one other culture. Be great if it were multiple cultures. But if we just look at the demographic shifts in this country, everybody ought to be bilingual. We shouldn't be treating bilingual kids as if they're the problem. We're the problem as monolingual speakers. Then the third thing is this notion of socio-political consciousness. And I use this example of Thomas Jefferson, and he's really complicated, and we can get into him. But this statement he makes in 1787 I find intriguing. He says, above all things, I hope that the education of the common people will be attended to, convinced that on their good sense we may rely with the most security for the preservation of a due degree of liberty. Now, in our 2023 hearing, that doesn't sound like anything special. Can I tell you that's a radical statement in 1787? Because in 1787, nobody cares about the common people being educated. Common people do what their common parents did. If your parents were farmers, you're gonna be a farmer. If your parent was a blacksmith, you're gonna be a blacksmith. Maybe your farmer dad says, well, I got 4 farmers, this 5th kid, I'm gonna send you over to the blacksmith's house and you can learn that. But there was no system of educating common people. The only people being educated in 1787 were the rich. And they were being educated by either sending their kids to New England or across the Atlantic to Europe. So for Jefferson to say back then, I think the common people ought to be educated, that's an amazing statement. We need them to be educated because you can't keep a democracy going without everybody being educated. That's the point. So real quick, I want to talk about, as an educator, how do you begin to think about your student learning? How do you think about cultural competence? How do you think about socio-political consciousness? I want to make a shift now, however, to talk about the evolution of culturally relevant pedagogy. I go in so many schools and see this sign. Oops. Oh, the question over here is how many of you are on TikTok? That is a real question. How many of you are on TikTok? Raise your hand. Okay. Y'all are the only ones that are in the same place where the students are. Everybody else, there's a whole world out there that the students are engaged in, and you don't even know about it. But I see that sign almost everywhere I go. No cell phones. Now, if you had come into this auditorium and we had a box out there for you to put your cell phone in, you'd have turned around and gone home. Because that's how vital the device is. How are our kids going to learn how to use them well if we're constantly saying you can't have them? Now, I know what the excuse is. It's a distraction. Have you ever taught 13-year-olds? Because everything is a distraction to a 13-year-old. I had a kid in my 8th grade class, you know what the distraction was? I had a window in the classroom. So am I going to board up the window? No. I've got to change some things to allow the kid to do that little look out there, but let him know that, okay, show me when you get back, right? We have to change. We keep trying to say the kids need to change. And the truth of the matter is what our youngsters have are not cell phones. They are computers. And if you check their logs, they don't make that many calls. They are texting. They are looking up information. They are posting on social media. It's just us old fuddy-duddies calling everybody. And getting sent to voicemail, incidentally, because nobody answers their phone, right? So the new digital divide is really not about race or class or gender. It really is a generational divide, that we don't understand that these young people, these are vital for what they do. So back in 1989, when I first started studying these teachers I call the Dream Keepers, what I saw was a focus on cultural history. In other words, people were revealing the things that their textbooks omitted. There was a focus on community issues, things like urban renewal, which today we would call gentrification, veterans' concerns, and homelessness. And there was a limited focus on student culture. I had one teacher of those 8 teachers who used rap lyrics to teach poetry. But if you are going to be what I call a dream keeper today, you have to be able to include popular culture in your understanding of culture. You need to recognize hip-hop's longevity and power. Stop, push, pause. What'd she say? Rewind. You have to understand hip-hop's longevity and power. We are celebrating hip-hop's 50th year. Hip-hop is older than some of y'all in this room. So when hip-hop first hit, what did people say? Oh, that ain't gonna last. Okay, we 50 years and they're not lasting. And it's so vital for the way in which kids understand the world. We need to catch up with Madison Avenue, so I hope I can get this video to play.
Watch me get Fred's Fruity Pebbles.
Who are you?
I'm the master rapper and I'm here to sing. I love Fruity Pebbles in a major way.
He loves Fruity Pebbles in a major way.
The bedrock yellow, orange, purple, lime, and red. But to get the fruity taste, I gotta trick Fred. Fruity.
To get the fruity taste, he's got to trick Fred. Barney.
Guess that's a wrap.
Most Fruity Pebbles cereal, part of this nutritious breakfast. Yabba-dabba delicious.
That commercial is over 30 years old. 1990. First of all, you know ain't nobody ate no Fruity Pebbles in a minute, right? That's an old commercial that Post figured out something about this genre is speaking to our customer base. And we could deconstruct it, and you see that Barney is invoking Run DMC. He got on a pork pie hat. He got on the gold chain. Barney got on Adidas, y'all. When have y'all seen Flintstones with shoes? And somehow they figured it out, and they continue to get it.
Hello? Yeah, yup. I can't find it. I'm looking for it right now. One second.
They say quit, they say done. They say we're too grown for fun. They say old, we say young. We say playful's never done. Don't fight the feeling, just let it flow. Stack it up, rack it up, let it go. Laughter is calling, pick up the phone. Let's stay playful, Oreo. Everyone's welcome, don't need a label. If we're still smiling, the future's bueno. I got a secret the world should know. Let's stay playful, Oreo.
Hello? Psych.
And when you do, every day's full. For every moment, we're grateful. No half, our glass all the way full. Yeah, yup, stay playful.
Who knew that Wiz Khalifa could sell you some Oreo cookies, right? Nabisco knew. And yet we want to keep all of this out of the classroom experience. That's what kids are bringing with them. So real quick, I want to wrap up by talking about what I think we've learned from COVID as we think about this hard reset. I think we learned that relationships matter. We learned that time can be a variable. We learned that technology has to move to the center. And we learned that schools have a role to play in meeting our kids' basic needs. So I will not linger here, but I want you to think about your plan for welcoming kids to classrooms, your plan for getting to know each kid, whether or not you're setting high expectations for them. Are you empathetic, and do you teach empathy? Are you positive and energetic? Are you passionate? Do you brag about your students? Are you building trust? And are you being yourself when you walk into that classroom? Are you being an authentic person? Our kids didn't miss math packets when schools closed. They missed their peers. They missed their caring adults who are around them. We also learned that technology must move to the center. This is a quote from the Google CEO that says, technology alone cannot improve education, but it can be a powerful part of the solution. In other words, before COVID, we treated technology just as a tool. My email's down, can you come fix it? I can't get this PowerPoint up, can you fix this? Now we understand that we can infuse technology in the very center of the work. whether it is instructional, where we now are creating a digital record of teaching for students. So right now, no one actually has to be absent. Because you miss a day, you should be able to come back to school and have the teacher say, check our class website and click on what we did yesterday. And our kids can help us do this. Because I think the fear of this is that we don't know how to do it. It can also help us organizationally, and as we take attendance, as we do grading, the technology is there to do that. And in terms of communication, reaching out to parents and to students, most people will not relinquish this precious device. They may lose their housing, they may lose their cars, but even in shelters, people have cell phones. And so, but are we texting them, or we think we can still send home 1,000 flyers and people will read them? That doesn't happen anymore. That time can be a variable. We have to ask ourselves, does everything we teach have to be determined by the clock or the calendar? What are some things we can ask students to accomplish that are not time dependent? And what do you think might happen if we became more forgiving regarding time? Does everything just have to be in these 45-minute segments, 9 months? One of the things that I saw during COVID was one of my former students who teaches high school brought his students together at 8 p.m. because it was an important speaker he wanted them to hear. And as I say all the time, 8 p.m. is not a problem for a teenager. 8 a.m. is the problem. But we're so wedded to just one way of doing this. And then finally, our schools do have a role to play in meeting our students' basic needs. So if you know that a kid is food insecure, what do you do? Because I know the very first thing we did in Madison, Wisconsin, when we closed schools, we didn't send home books. We sent home food. What resources are you aware of that are in the community that students can reach out to and be served by? I asked schools to think about what they did with last year's Lost and Found. You got all that stuff in there. Why not launder it and say, hey, we're having a free sale. Come and select some mittens or gloves. If you find your own, please take those. But literally, we end up with all of this stuff, and yet kids are going without. What happens when students don't have access to the necessary school supplies? Do we just say you can't participate? Or do we have a way to ensure that they get those things they need? And finally, do you know how to recognize the health needs, both the physical and the mental health? We are in an incredible moment. I'm not as pessimistic as some because I think that this is an opportunity that we can grab hold to. But I want to leave you with a statement from one of my real heroes. It's a man by the name of Miles Horton. If you don't know Miles Horton was the founder of the Highlander Folk School in Mount Eagle, Tennessee. Highlander is where Martin Luther King, Septima Clark, Rosa Parks went to learn how to get involved in activism. And Miles Horton says the following: the people with the problem are the same people with the solution. So while I'm happy to be here and share with you, I won't solve your problems. You will solve them. The people you work with will solve them. The communities in which you work will solve them. But trust me, it is indeed time for a hard reset. Thank you.